After his young wife dies, having infected him with a deadly disease, a man faces the collapse of his life, exile from society, and ultimately finds love and meaning among fellow outcasts until his own death comes. New York City was ablaze with thousands of lights under a warm May sky. Loud music was playing on the roof of a trendy Manhattan bar, crowded with young people. Lily was laughing and dancing, her arms raised to the sky, her light blonde hair flying around her face. Tall and slender, with expressive gray-blue eyes and a bold mole near her lips, she seemed to absorb the rhythm of the city, every beat. Her bright red dress caught the reflections of the neon signs, making her the center of attention on the impromptu dance floor. Several men were watching her with admiration, some trying to catch her eye, but Jacob knew that the smile was meant for him, or at least he wanted to believe it was. He stood at the bar, watching her. He was tall, with a slight stoop and the tense gait of a man accustomed to being in control. His dark, curly hair was slightly tousled, and his face, with its strong jaw and sharp nose, had an expression that mixed excitement and tenderness. In a gray t-shirt and leather jacket, he seemed out of place among the glossy crowd, but next to Lily, the contrast seemed almost harmonious. Jacob stood at the bar, fiddling with a glass of whiskey with ice. He watched Lily dance carefree, her eyes closed, completely surrendered to the music. Deep down, he admired her freedom and beauty. How lucky he is to have her, he thought, trying to suppress the slight tingle of jealousy. After all, they had been married for 2 years now, and trust was the foundation of their relationship. Someone tapped Jacob on the shoulder behind him. He turned around and saw Mother, his colleague and longtime friend, with a wide grin on his face. Mike nodded towards Lily. "Your wife is on fire today, huh?" he shouted, trying to drown out the music. Jacob chuckled and took a sip of whiskey. "As always," he replied, also raising his voice. "All she wants to do is dance." Mike winked. "Take care of her, buddy. Guys won't take their eyes off a beauty like that." Jacob smiled tensely at his friend's joke. He had noticed it himself. Someone was always circling Lily, but she always came back to him, took his hand, kissed him like now. Lily suddenly emerged from the crowd of dancers and, out of breath, wrapped her arms around Jacob's neck. "Let's go dance," she exclaimed, her eyes shining with happiness and the champagne she had drunk. He put the glass on the counter. "I'm not really." He began, but Lily pulled him toward the center of the court, not taking no for an answer. The music changed to a slower composition. Lily snuggled into Jacob's arms, wrapping her arms around his neck. He could smell her perfume, a light floral scent, and the warmth of her flushed body. Jacob's heart began to beat faster. All worries fade away, leaving just the two of them in the open air of the metropolis. "I love you," he whispered in her ear, lightly stroking her back with his hand through the thin fabric of her dress. Lily smiled back, hugging him even tighter. "And I you," she whispered. Jacob caught her gaze for a moment. In her eyes, brown, radiant, he saw genuine tenderness. He suddenly felt guilty for his fleeting jealousy. Nonsense, he thought. She's with me after all. When the music stopped, Lily laughed and kissed her husband on the cheek, her face flushed from dancing. "I'll be right back, okay?" she said. "I need to go to the bathroom and freshen up." Jacob nodded, letting her go reluctantly. "Okay, I'll be here." He watched as Lily gracefully weaved through the guests and disappeared through the door leading into the building. Mike was there again, handing Jacob another drink. "Here," Mike said. "Why are you so gloomy? Everything okay?" Jacob shrugged, taking the glass. "Everything is fine, Mike." The friend chuckled. "She's just fire for you. True, you yourself don't really like such parties, do you?" Jacob twirled the glass in his hands. "I'm probably not at the age to party endlessly anymore," he joked. "It's hard to jump around until the morning when you're 30. 30 is not 80, relax." Mike burst out laughing. "Lily is nothing special. What is she, 27? 28, Jacob corrected automatically. Right, Mike looked thoughtfully in the direction where Lily had disappeared. "You know, Jake, be careful. Girls like that, free, beautiful. Everyone wants to get them. She probably has a ton of admirers. Jacob winced. What are you getting at? Mike raised his hands as if defending himself. No need, just some friendly advice. You know what kind of people they are. They see a ring on a finger, it doesn't stop some. Jacob felt the unease stir in his chest again. He had never doubted Lily, but now unbidden images popped into his head. Someone he didn't know leaning too close to her, whispering compliments in her ear. He took a sip of whiskey, trying to push the thoughts away. I trust Lily. Of course, Mike said quickly. She loves you, it's obvious. Just be there. I'm always here, Jacob answered dryly and walked away, pretending to look for Lily with his eyes. At that moment, Lily returned. Her hair was smoothed down. Her lips were freshly coated with lipstick. She was beaming. Did you miss me? She asked slyly, approaching her husband. Jacob forced a smile. Of course. Lily took his arm. Let's go get some air. It's stuffy here. Together they walked to the edge of the roof, where it was a little quieter. Before them lay the nighttime New York, an endless sea of lights. Lily took a deep breath. I love this city, she said dreamily, looking into the distance. You feel alive here. Jacob, after admiring the view for a moment, turned his gaze to his wife. Are you happy? She looked at him in surprise. Of course. And you? I do. I just sometimes think that maybe you lack. He hesitated, choosing his words, variety. Well, I don't know. You and I are so different. What if you get bored with me? Lily frowned, letting go of his hand. What makes you think that? Jacob shrugged, feeling awkward. You're so bright. You need emotions, movement, and I'm a homebody, I guess. Lily laughed quietly and shook her head. Nonsense. I like your reliability. You are my quiet harbor. It's just that sometimes I want to have fun, and you can just stand next to me. Is that bad? Jacob exhaled, a feeling of relief spreading inside him. No, not bad. Sorry, it probably overheated. Lily touched his cheek softly. You think too much, my dear. She looked him straight in the eyes, her voice warming. I love you just the way you are. He covered her hand with his palm and squeezed it. I love you too. Lily smiled and stood on her tiptoes, kissing him. The sweet, slightly salty taste of her lips with a hint of champagne made Jacob forget all his doubts. The party was winding down towards midnight. The guests were gradually leaving. Lily, having run and danced, looked tired but happy. She and Jacob said goodbye to Mike and the others, and holding hands, went down to the noisy night streets of Manhattan. As they walked down the sidewalk toward the taxi stand, Jacob noticed that Lily was shivering. The night wind was cool. Are you cold? He asked solicitously, stopping and taking off his jacket. A little, Lily admitted, willingly wrapping herself in the offered jacket. Thank you. She pressed herself against him, and they walked faster. Jacob raised his hand, catching the car. Suddenly, Lily began to cough, quietly, but several times in a row. Jacob looked at her with concern. Are you okay? Lily waved her hand, driving away her anxiety. Yes, my throat was just dry. I drank an ice-cold cocktail in one gulp. No big deal. He nodded, but noted that the cough sounded rough, strained. However, a minute later, a taxi pulled up, and Jacob's thoughts turned elsewhere. They climbed into the back seat of a yellow convertible. Lily relaxed, resting her head on his shoulder. Jacob put his arm around her, quietly telling the driver their address. The car started moving. Lily began to sing the tune of the song. They were dancing in a half-whisper. Jacob looked at the streets rushing past the window and felt happiness spreading in him like a quiet wave. His beloved woman was next to him, leaning trustingly toward him. Everything is fine, he repeated to himself. Everything will be fine. But somewhere deep inside, a vague uneasiness stirred. Jacob mechanically touched the top of Lily's hair with his lips. She did not move, she seemed to have dozed off. He could only look at the endless lights of the night city, wondering where this strange feeling came from, as if their fragile happiness could burst like a soap bubble. That night, when Jacob returned home, he could not sleep for a long time. Lily, having taken a cough medicine, quickly fell into a restless sleep, wearily pressed against his side. Jacob lay in the semi-darkness of their bedroom, listening to her uneven breathing and looking at the ceiling. He remembered the night 3 years ago when he had first met Lily. It had been at a charity event at a small Soho gallery. She was organizing an exhibition of works by young artists, and he had come along with a friend who was investing in the project. Jacob didn't know her name. Then he had simply noticed a beautiful girl in a flowing, flowery dress who was animatedly explaining the meaning of an abstract painting to someone. Then the girl suddenly burst out laughing, and Jacob had been completely floored by her laughter. It was loud and infectious like bells. At that moment, he knew he had to meet her. Jacob, who had previously been timid with women, surprised himself when he overcame his inner uncertainty and decided to approach Lily. The city seemed to be buzzing around him, the music drowning out his thoughts, and the fear of rejection humming in his chest. But something in her dance light, almost weightless, gave him strength. It turned out she had a wonderful sense of humor. She immediately appreciated his attempt to look elegant and with feigned seriousness picked at his tie. "Too serious for art, Mr. Bank Clerk," she sneered, flicking her finger at his knot. He laughed, surprised by how easily the tension had melted away. They began to talk, at first about trivial matters, then more deeply. It was astonishingly quick to feel as if they had known each other for a long time. By midnight, they were sitting together in a corner of the bar, leaning over empty glasses and laughing like teenagers. Later, when the crowd began to thin, they went outside. The night was softly warming the city, the streets of Manhattan were shimmering with neon, and it seemed as if all of New York was breathing in time with their walk. They wandered until dawn, licking melting ice cream cones from a 24-hour cart on Broadway. Lily chartered non-stop about paintings, about her dreams of opening her own gallery, where the walls would smell of fresh paint and the windows would overlook the park. About how, as a child, she would skip art lessons to swim in the river, dreaming of becoming part of the water element. Her eyes sparkled like stained glass in the sun, and every word was filled with a thirst for life. And Jacob listened, fascinated, and felt his measured, almost mathematically calculated life give way to something new, chaotic, alive, beautiful. It was like a storm, unpredictable, fast, bright, and he wanted to be part of this storm. 6 months passed. He carried the ring in his pocket for a week, waiting for the right moment. And on New Year's Eve, when the sky over Central Park lit up with fireworks, he got down on one knee in front of her. It wasn't very original, the crowd, the lights, the noise, but it was heartfelt. Lily burst into tears and laughed at the same time. Her hair was stuck to her cheeks from snowflakes and tears. She grabbed his face as if she was afraid he would disappear and screamed. "You're crazy." She then kissed him and added in a whisper, "But of course, yes." Now, looking at his wife's pale profile on the pillow, Jacob felt a piercing tenderness. Yes, they were different. They had their disagreements, but love had always seemed unbreakable to him. If only someone had told me then, on that night of fireworks, that everything would turn out. He thought bitterly, carefully removing a strand of hair from Lily's forehead. She moaned softly in her sleep, and Jacob leaned down, touching his lips to her sweat-dampened temple. "I love you," he whispered into the darkness. "Please be with me, always." Lily mumbled something incoherently without waking up. Jacob hugged her tighter, trying to drive away the shadow of anxiety. But for some reason his heart ached, as if he sensed that their shared always could end too soon. 2 weeks had passed since that night on the roof. The spring wind no longer seemed warm. Cold, lingering rains had begun in New York. Lily wrapped herself in a blanket more and more often. Complaining of fatigue, Jacob wrote off her illness as a cold nighttime partying doesn't go to waste. He made her ginger tea with honey, forcing her to rest. Lily laughed. "Did Dr. Jake order bed rest?" She tried to joke, but her voice was becoming hoarse. One evening, Lily suddenly announced that she was going to get some fresh air, to go to a friend's house for an hour. Jacob was surprised. "Wouldn't it be better for you to lie down? You had a fever this morning." Lily, standing in front of the mirror and touching up her pale cheeks with blush, waved her hand. "How long can I lie here? I'm suffocating at home. I'll just run out for coffee. I'm already feeling much better." Jacob noticed that she was putting on a new dress and even curled her hair, clearly trying not to look like she was sick. "Which friend?" he asked softly. Lily met his gaze in the mirror, and something flashed in her eyes' wariness. "With Rachel, you don't know her. We met at yoga." Jacob didn't know Lily had a Rachel, but he said nothing. He was wary of this eagerness to get out, despite the cough she was suppressing with lozenges. "Do you want me to give you a ride?" he offered, trying to hide his concern. Lily immediately shook her head. "No need, dear. I'll take a taxi. There's a cafe nearby. You better rest. I have to go to work tomorrow." She walked up and kissed him on the cheek, smelling like mint cough syrup. "Everything's really fine, don't worry," she said, avoiding his eyes. Jacob ran his palm over her hot forehead. "You have a fever, honey. Maybe you shouldn't go anywhere." Lily flushed with irritation and pulled away. "I already told you I'm better. Stop taking care of me like a child. I'll go for an hour and come back." He fell silent, confused. Lily quickly threw on her coat and, without giving him another chance to say anything, slipped out the door. Jacob sighed heavily, alone in the empty apartment. An unpleasant feeling crept into his soul, a mixture of concern for her health and vague jealousy. The name Rachel was spinning in his head. He tried to call Lily to ask her to come back, but changed his mind she wouldn't listen anyway. Lily returned after midnight, when Jacob was already restless. He met her in the hallway. "So how was the coffee?" He couldn't help but be sarcastic when he saw her flushed face and sparkling eyes. "What, how?" Lily tensed up, undressing. "We sat for a bit, chatted. I warned you I'd be late." Jacob smelled the bitter scent of wine coming from her, and his heart sank. "Are you sure you were with a friend?" he blurted out. Lily stared at him silently, and suddenly anger flashed in her eyes. "Of course, with a friend. You don't believe me." Jacob lowered his tone. "I just find it strange. You're sick, but you get dressed up and rush off to who knows where." I was worried. "I'm an adult. I can go out for an hour," she snapped. "And stop interrogating me." He wanted to say something else, but Lily suddenly swayed, losing her balance. Jacob grabbed her by the elbow. "Lily!" Her face turned suddenly pale. "My head is spinning," she whispered. Jacob led her to the bed. "Sit down. Here, quietly. Breathe." Lily sank to the edge of the bed, closing her eyes, her chest heaving. "Sorry," she managed to say after a minute. "I guess I overdid it. I wanted the best to unwind." Jacob stroked her back, concern instantly replacing all suspicion. "SHH, everything is fine. The main thing now is to get treatment. Please, no more getting some fresh air. Okay?" Lily nodded, her head falling tiredly onto his shoulder. "Cold." He put her under the blanket, took her temperature again almost 40. All night he changed the compresses on her forehead, listening to her raving in her sleep. Time after time in oblivion she called him, then sobbed, "No, don't." Jacob sat next to her, feeling how cold fear rose in his heart. At that time he did not yet know what exactly he was afraid of, betrayal or death, but a premonition of catastrophe was already hovering in the darkness of their bedroom. However, after a few days, the situation worsened. Lily had a temperature of almost 40, her face was haggard. At night, she woke up in a cold sweat, coughing often. Jacob was seriously worried. "Darling, this is not just a cold. Let's go to the doctor." "I'm better," Lily insisted stubbornly, confusedly avoiding his gaze. She was taking an antipyretic and trying to hide the trembling in her hands. "Another day, and I'll be better." But by the end of the week, Lily was barely able to get out of bed. One morning, Jacob found her sitting on the bathroom floor, slumped against the wall. She had been vomiting all night. "That's enough," he said, frightened, picking her up in his arms. "We're going to the hospital." "No." Lily protested weakly, but her head fell helplessly onto his shoulder. Jacob didn't listen to any objections. He helped her get dressed, and threw a warm sweater on her. Lily could barely stand on her feet. Taking her by the elbow, he called a taxi to the nearest hospital. "How long have you had these symptoms?" The middle-aged doctor in the emergency room peered at Lily over his glasses. She lay on a gurney, covered with a white sheet, her lips bloodless. Jacob stood next to her, nervously fiddling with the edge of the sheet. Lily was silent. She seemed to withdraw into herself, staring at the ceiling. Jacob answered for her. "For about a week, maybe more. High temperature, cough, severe weakness. She feels sick, sweats at night." The doctor nodded, writing down. "It looks like a serious infection. We'll do some tests. X-ray of the lungs, blood." He turned his gaze to Lily. "Have you ever had anything serious before? HIV, hepatitis?" Lily jerked as if she had been struck. Jacob looked at his wife in confusion, then at the doctor. "Of course not," he blurted out. "Why such questions?" The doctor calmly explained. "I have to ask. Some symptoms may indicate immunodeficiency." Lily closed her eyes. Jacob noticed how her thin fingers clutched the sheets. "Do what you have to do, doctor," he said quietly, feeling the horror growing. "Just help her." She was taken away for examination. Jacob was left alone in the stuffy, chlorine-smelling corridor of the emergency room. He paced the tiled floor, looking now at the greenish walls, now at the doors with incomprehensible inscriptions. Anxious thoughts swarmed in his head. Immunodeficiency. Where from? He was running his mind feverishly. Maybe some exotic disease from their recent trip. They had vacationed in Mexico last summer. Malaria? But is that how malaria manifests itself? An hour later, Lily was transferred to a ward. The doctor told Jacob that his wife had severe pneumonia and needed to be hospitalized. They did a blood test and had to wait for the results. He advised Jacob to also donate blood just in case. Jacob didn't understand why he needed to be tested, but he compiled automatically. A nurse drew his blood in a small procedure room. His hand shook slightly as he held the cotton swab to the injection site, just in case. These words of the doctor did not give him peace. When he returned to Lily, he found her hooked up to Enrollment 4. An oxygen mask lay nearby. She seemed to be refusing to put it on. Lily's cheeks were sunken. Her eyes were feverishly shining. "I'm sorry," she whispered as soon as he entered. Jacob sat down on the chair by the bed. "For what, my dear?" He gently stroked her cold hand, glad that she had at least come to her senses a little. "You'll get better soon, you'll see." Lily shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "No, I have to." She coughed, interrupting herself, and closed her eyes for a second from weakness. "SHH, don't say it." Jacob became worried. "You can't worry." She shook her head. "Jacob." Her voice was quiet, broken. "I have to tell you, before it's too late." His heart sank. He had never seen his wife like this, scared, guilty. His fingers tightened their grip on her hand. "Lily, don't do it now. We'll discuss everything later. The main thing now is for you to get better." Lily coughed again, a single tear rolling down her cheek. She managed to say with difficulty, "Forgive me, please." Jacob's mouth went dry. He leaned closer. "What are you asking for forgiveness for? It's not your fault. It's just an illness. It could have happened to anyone." Lily closed her eyes. The trembling of her eyelashes made it clear that she was crying silently. For several terrible seconds, she did not answer. Only her thin body shook with muffled sobs. "I have something to blame myself for," she finally whispered, not looking at her husband. I cheated on you." Jacob thought he had misheard. He recoiled as if from a blow. "What?" he breathed out. Lily squeezed her eyes shut, her lips turning white. "I'm sorry," she repeated barely audibly. Jacob's chest sank. The world swayed. He suddenly felt as if he were falling from a great height. It took him a moment to find his voice. Cheated. When? With whom? Lily, what nonsense. He broke into a scream at the last words, unable to contain himself. Lily screamed, jumping back on the pillow. Jacob came to his senses and immediately lowered his voice, looking around. The door of the ward was not completely closed. "Explain," he whispered furiously. "This is feverish delirium, isn't it? You're just not yourself." She shook her head, the tears flowing more intensely. "No, it's true." Jacob felt his own hand shaking, and he released her hand as if it had been burned. "With whom?" he repeated demandingly, feeling the blood pounding in his temples. "It doesn't matter." Lily groaned. "None of them meant anything, I swear." None of them. The words echoed in Jacob's ears. There were several of them. He pressed his shaking hands to his forehead, trying to cope with the growing panic. How long ago? He himself did not recognize his hoarse voice. Lily looked away. "A few months. I don't know." She sobbed, coughed again. "I was stupid. Looking. I don't know what I was looking for." Jacob was seething inside. Each answer she gave him seemed to add more boiling water to an open wound. He stood up because he could no longer sit. "A few months," he said with a bitter smile, feeling a chilling weight spreading across his shoulders. "How many were there, Lily? 2, 3? She covered her face with her hands. "Please, don't." Jacob took a step back from the bed. He suddenly found it hard to breathe. The room was spinning before his eyes. "You," he choked with anger and pain. "You lied to me, all this time. God, Lily." He hit the metal headboard with his fist. It clanged loudly. Lily shuddered, sobbed even louder. "I'm sorry," she repeated through her fingers. Jacob kept seeing images of her saying she'd be late at work, of her laughing when she got the text, of her that night on the roof, and all the while she was cheating. He felt physically ill. He turned around abruptly and ran out of the room, slamming the door. The hallway was silent, broken only by the distant sounds of medical equipment. Jacob leaned his forehead against the cold wall, trying to breathe deeply. He felt sick from the shock. "This is nonsense. No, not this." There was a hammer pounding in my head. Several nurses glanced at him sideways, whispering. He realized that he needed to pull himself together. He ran his hands over his face, feeling the moisture, either sweat or tears. A few minutes later, he returned to the room. Lily was lying with her back turned, her shoulders still shaking. Jacob sank to the edge of the bed, trying to stay away so as not to break down again. Everything inside him screamed with pain and humiliation, but Lily looked so weak, so helpless. "Why?" was all he could manage to squeeze out dully. Lily slowly turned her head towards him, her face wet, her lips trembling. "I don't know," she whispered. "At first it was a mistake. Then again." She sobbed. "I felt some kind of emptiness inside," she said quietly, her voice breaking. "Like something was missing. It's not your fault. It's just, there was a hole inside me. I wanted more emotions, to prove to myself that I was still young, attractive. I wanted to feel freedom, I guess. Stupid, terribly stupid." Lily took a sharp breath and continued, not letting go of his gaze. "The first time it all happened by accident, I didn't understand how. We had a fight over something trivial. You went to see your parents for the weekend, and I got drunk at a party and slept with someone. When I sobered up, I hated myself, but it was too late. Then I was afraid to admit it and tried to forget, and the feeling of guilt, it ate away at me. And it's strange, instead of stopping, I repeated the mistake again, as if to spite myself, as if I wanted to punish myself, or, I don't know, test my boundaries." She closed her eyes in shame. "I swore every time that it would be the last, but whenever you went on a business trip or stayed late at work, that damned part of me would take over. And at home, I would look at you so trusting, so loving, and I would feel sick of myself. I was disgusted. Disgusting." Lily covered her face with trembling hands and began to sob. Jacob was silent, breathing heavily. She gathered her strength and continued through her tears. "I understand that it is unforgivable. You never deserved this. Maybe I subconsciously wanted to destroy our happiness, because I didn't believe that I deserved it. I have always been unreliable, flighty, and you are the best." She tried to meet his eyes, leaning forward pleadingly. If I could turn back time, Jacob, I would choose you, only you. He closed his eyes, feeling a new wave of rage and pain. So many confessions at once, too much. A mistake, he repeated hoarsely. You, how many times have you been mistaken? Lily groaned. Stop it. No, you tell me. Jacob's voice broke. I have a right to know, damn it. She paused, gathering her courage. 3, she admitted barely audibly. 3 men in the last 6 months. Jacob threw his head back and stared at the ceiling, trying to fight back the tears that were coming through. It was only physical, Lily continued hurriedly. I didn't feel anything for any of them. It wasn't love, Jacob, believe me. I don't understand why. He laughed bitterly through clenched teeth. If not love, what is it? Entertainment? Adrenaline? Lily closed her eyes, fresh tears rolling down her temples onto the pillow. Jacob suddenly noticed how sharply her cheekbones stood out under her skin. She was truly melting before his eyes. They were silent for a few minutes. Only Lily's rapid breathing and the quiet squeak of the Roman 4 broke the silence. Finally, Jacob asked the question that was most terrifying to him. Is it because of me? Lily opened her eyes in amazement. What? No, no, it's not your fault. You were a wonderful husband. It's not about you. Then what? He blurted out. Everything was. Fine with us, wasn't it? Or was it? You were pretending all this time. I wasn't pretending, she whispered pleadingly. I loved you. I love you. Loved you so much that you cheated. His voice was bitter. 3 years together, Lily. 2 years married. Is that how you act when you love? Lily couldn't find anything to say. She looked away again, sobbing. Jacob felt helplessness wash over him. It seemed that a little more, and he would burst into tears along with her. But then the door to the ward quietly opened. The doctor entered with a folder in his hands, gloomy. He glanced at both of them, lingering on Jacob's stricken face and Lily's tearful face. Mr. Gray? The doctor asked, looking at Jacob. He nodded automatically. We need to talk about the test results. Jacob felt his heart sink into his heels. He stood up slowly. Yes, doctor. What is it? The doctor glanced at Lily. It would be better to sit down. Lily covered her mouth with her hand, and Jacob, unable to find a chair, froze in place. The tests confirmed that your wife has HIV infection, the doctor said quietly, apparently trying to soften the blow. Jacob closed his eyes. Despite all the shock of the last few minutes, these words pierced him with new pain. He shook his head. No. The doctor sighed heavily. In addition, the blood test shows an extremely low CD4 level. This means that the disease is very advanced and has progressed to the AIDS stage. That is why the condition is so serious. Pneumonia is caused by a weakened immune system. Every word the doctor said hit Jacob like a bullet. He looked at Lily, who was looking at him with wide eyes, full of horror and shame. We also received the results of your analysis, Mr. Gray, the doctor continued. Jacob froze. He had almost forgotten that he had donated blood. And, he asked, barely audibly. The doctor glanced at the papers. Your HIV test is also positive. Silence. Somewhere behind the wall, a monitor was beeping. In the hallway, the wheels of gurneys creaked. Jacob looked at the doctor, but heard nothing else. The world narrowed to a single point, positive. It was beyond my comprehension. He was infected. No, not him. This was a mistake. Lily burst into tears, trying to say something, but Jacob didn't hear. His legs buckled. He grabbed the side of the bed to keep from falling. The doctor gently touched his elbow. Let's sit down. I understand the news is terrible, but the main thing now is to start therapy for both of you. Especially your wife. She needs immediate antiretroviral therapy and treatment for pneumonia. I'm so sorry. Lily's weak voice came. Jacob sank slowly into the chair the doctor had quickly placed for him. He clasped his head in his hands. There was a ringing in his ears. Mr. Gray, the doctor said softly, I understand your condition, but I must ask. Where do you think the infection could have come from? Jacob smiled bitterly without raising his head. How? What do I think? He took his hands away from his face, pointing with a trembling gesture at his wife. Well, here it is where. The doctor glanced quickly at Lily, then nodded, understanding everything without words. I see. In any case, it's not that important now. The main thing is the treatment. You both have a difficult road ahead, but we will do everything possible. The doctor's words were drowned out by the roar of blood in Jacob's ears. All he could see in front of him was Lily's pale face on the pillow. Her lips were moving, it seemed she was repeating, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Everything inside him broke off completely. He wanted to scream, to break something, to tear this room apart, to run away. But he was as if rooted to the spot. If you need time, stay with her, came the doctor's voice as he walked away toward the door. I'll come back later. The door closed. There was an oppressive silence. Only the heavy breathing of two people whose world had suddenly collapsed filled the tiny hospital room. Jacob slowly rose from his chair and approached the bed. He looked down at Lily. His face was stony. Lily was crying quietly, her gaze fixed somewhere around his waist, not daring to meet his eyes. So that's how it is, he said quietly, almost in a whisper. You killed us both. Lily closed her eyes, shuddering. He saw her open her mouth, trying to answer, but she didn't have the strength. I trusted you, Jacob continued monotonously, as if talking to himself. I didn't look at anyone else. And you? For what? A few minutes of pleasure. Lily opened her eyes. I know. I'm a monster. I'm guilty. Jacob was silent. It was as if everything inside him had been burned to the ground. He stood and looked at his dying wife, whom he had recently idolized. A mixture of pity, love, and hatred tore him apart. If you want to leave, she whispered, I'll understand. I don't deserve to have you around. He smiled bitterly. Leave, his hands clenched into fists, and abandon you now when you're, he hesitated, unable to say, dying. Whatever, Lily, I'm not like that. I won't abandon you. Lily finally looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise and hope. Is it true? Jacob looked away and shook his head. What will it change? He muttered. We, he swallowed bitterly, are already tied by the same chain, until the end. Lily reached out to him with a weak gesture. Jacob moved closer automatically, and she touched his hand with her fingertips. I'm so sorry, she breathed out. I never thought it would go this far. He looked at her pale face, and suddenly a wave of memories washed over him. Their wedding on the ocean shore, Lily in a light dress, barefoot on the sand. That evening when they spontaneously took off on a trip. Her laughter, her smell. All crossed out by one confession, one illness. But this fragile woman in front of him was still the one he loved with all his heart. No matter how hard it was, leaving her now, he really couldn't. Jacob sat down carefully on the edge of the bed. He took her hand in his. It was icy. You need to fight, do you hear? He said quietly, trying to speak evenly. We'll start treatment. The doctors will help. You'll get better. Lily shook her head. No, it's too late, I feel. Don't say that, he interrupted, although he himself understood that the chances were slim. Fight, and I will stay. Lily's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. She lifted his hand and, trembling, pressed it to her pale lips. Thank you. In response, Jacob only smiled sadly, running his fingers over her damp cheek. A storm of emotions was still raging inside, but now he just needed to be there. The next few days merged into a long nightmare. Lily was hooked up to oxygen, treated with antibiotics for pneumonia, and started on antiretroviral therapy. But the disease did not go away. Jacob sat by her bedside for days. At night, they tried to persuade him to go home and rest, but he refused. He slept in the chair opposite, holding her hand. He watched Lily fade away. She could barely eat, only drinking water from a spoon that he gave her. Sometimes, waking up at night, he heard her delirium. She called for him, cried, apologized, even in unconsciousness. One quiet night hour, when only the duty light was on in the ward, Lily suddenly spoke with unexpected clarity. Jacob. He perked up. She hadn't pronounced his name so clearly for a long time. He leaned towards her. I'm here, darling. Lily turned her head towards him with the last of her strength. Promise me. One thing. Jacob squeezed her hand. Anything you like. She began to breathe more quickly, collecting her thoughts. Live. Further. Please. Don't give up. His throat tightened in a spasm. He nodded, forcing out. Okay, I promise. Lily smiled faintly, seeming to calm down. She closed her eyes, still holding his hand. In the morning, her condition deteriorated sharply. The monitoring machine began to beep with an alarm. The doctors and nurses pushed Jacob out of the room with a short, "We're doing everything we can." He stood in the hallway, stunned, clutching his hair with shaking hands, listening to the doctor's commands muffled by the closed door. After 20 agonizingly long minutes, the doctor came out. Time seemed to slow down, each tick of the clock thundering like a blow to the chest. Jacob stood against the wall, pressed against it, as if it could hold him. When the doctor appeared at the door, he understood everything before the words. One look was enough. The dull, tired gaze, the slumped shoulders, the silence around him, everything screamed loss. I'm sorry, the doctor said quietly, almost soundlessly, and immediately looked away, as if he had no right to look into the face of a man whose life had just fallen apart. Jacob walked past him like a sleepwalker. He walked without feeling his feet or the floor beneath him, as if he were walking through water or a dream, sticky and heavy and scary. The door to the room was ajar, and he pushed it open, holding his breath, as if he hoped it was just a mistake. Lily lay on a snow-white hospital bed, covered with a sheet up to her chest. Her head was turned toward the door, her blonde hair spread out on the pillow like golden threads, and her eyes were closed, as if she were sleeping, peacefully, quietly, serenely too quietly. But he knew this is not a dream. This is the end. The world rocked. Something snapped inside him, as if a string taut with years of love had suddenly snapped. Jacob fell to his knees next to the bed. His hand reached out, trembling, almost afraid to touch, but it found her palm, already cold, unyielding. No, he whispered. No, no, no. Bitter sobs choked his throat, squeezed his chest, and tired themselves out of him like an animal that had been locked up too long. He pressed his forehead to her hand, not noticing the tears dripping onto the sheets. Forgive me, he whispered through his tears over and over again, as if these words could turn back time. He didn't understand who he blamed himself for not being able to save her, for all the unsaid words, for every quarrelsome evening, her for leaving him alone, and Lily's funeral took place on a cold, gray morning. A light rain fell, turning the graveyard's clay soil into mud. In the small Brooklyn cemetery, just a few people stood under black umbrellas between the identical rows of tombstones. Jacob barely noticed those around him. He didn't remember their faces or words of condolence. Before his eyes was only the black, glossy surface of the coffin slowly lowered into the damp pit. In his hand, Jacob clutched a crumpled funeral rose with whitened fingers. When the coffin lay at the bottom of the grave, he threw the flower after it, without uttering a word. When the earth fell on the coffin and the damp clay began to fall, Jacob felt as if a part of himself had been buried. He crossed himself automatically, although he rarely went to church, and whispered under his breath, "Goodbye, Lily." He wanted to say more, to shout his love and pain into the unfeeling gray sky, but his voice was stuck in his throat. And who would he tell? Lily would not hear, and the others would not understand. The cemetery was ringing with silence, only the rain rustling on the umbrellas and the cawing of a raven somewhere in the distance. The wet rose Jacob had thrown away lay dark on the loose earth of the grave. That's it, flashed through his mind empty. He expected his heart to burst with grief, but inside there was only an icy emptiness. A little further away, Lily's mother was quietly sobbing into her black lace scarf, and her father stood, staring woodenly into the hole. They knew only the official version: pneumonia, complications. The word AIDS was not spoken, but hung in the air like a shadow, as if everyone here could taste it, but no one dared to say it out loud. Jacob felt their gazes, tenacious, cold, penetrating, as if they were looking for the culprit in all this tragic silence, and found it in him. He was silent for a long time, struggling with himself, but when the ceremony was over and most people had already begun to leave, he approached her. Lily's mother stood at the edge, alone, clutching her handkerchief until her knuckles were white. "Mrs. Crawford," he began, his voice low and hoarse, "I need to tell you something." She turned to him slowly. Tears had left wet tracks on her face, but her eyes were dry, heavy, full of reproach. "Whatever you want to say, Jacob," she said quietly, "it won't bring my daughter back." He nodded, pursing his lips. "I know." Pause. He looked down, then up again. "You think I ruined her, that I brought trouble. And wasn't it you?" Her voice was barely audible, but sharp as a shard of glass. "After you, she disappeared, distanced herself. She was ill. She was silent. We didn't know what was happening to her." He closed his eyes. The words cut to the core, but he continued anyway, quietly, but with an inner fire. "You didn't know, Mrs. Crawford, because she learned to be silent from childhood, learned to hide pain, not to show fear, to smile when something was breaking inside. You raised her to be strong, yes, but she didn't know how to ask for help. From anyone. Not from you, not from me." The woman flinched slightly. He saw something wavering in her, either anger or doubt, but he did not give her a chance to speak. "I don't blame you. I'm trying to understand why neither of us noticed when she got really sick, why she chose to fight alone, why she thought love was something that had to be earned too." He swallowed. "Maybe it's not just my fault. Are you saying that we raised her badly?" Her voice trembled, but not from tears anymore, but from rage. "I'm saying," he answered quietly, "that maybe neither of us ever made her feel that she could just be weak, confused, real, and still be loved." There was a moment of silence. The wind stirred the black lace scarf in her hands. She stood motionless, unable to leave or say anything else, and he simply looked at her, not reproachfully, but with the desperate hope that she would understand. Then he nodded, as if saying goodbye, and turned away. Like if betrayal is not about you. And in order not to miss the next story, be sure to subscribe. We appreciate each of you. After the funeral, almost no one spoke to him. A few acquaintances, former colleagues of Lily's, shook his hand timidly, muttered condolences, and then hurried away. Lily's parents, supporting her grandmother by the arms, also left, without deigning to say goodbye to their son-in-law or invite him to remember their daughter together. Jacob was left alone in front of the fresh mound of earth, while workers installed a temporary plaque with the name. He stood there for a long time until he realized that he was soaking wet and completely frozen. His heart was empty. Once he had been afraid of losing Lily, now he had lost everything. The days that followed were hazy and foggy. Jacob remembered them in fragments, signing death papers at the hospital, choosing a casket at the funeral home, nodding dumbly at the first options offered. He answered the funeral director's questions mechanically, without realizing what he was saying. Lily seemed to be everywhere, in the seat next to him in a taxi, in every corner of his home. The night after she died, he hadn't slept a wink, sitting on the floor of his empty living room, trying to comprehend that he would always be alone. Ridiculous details floated into his memory. Lily laughing at his old dressing gown, calling it his teddy bear, singing along to the radio in the kitchen in the mornings. These images cut into his heart like a knife. On the eve of the funeral, Jacob found her favorite bottle of perfume in the nightstand. He opened the lid, inhaled the delicate scent of jasmine, and suddenly burst into tears for the first time in a long time. The pain of loss rolled over him in a wave, knocking the breath out of him. Clutching the cold glass of the bottle in his fist, he cried until he was exhausted, until the tears ran out. It was like a fever, necessary for survival. The next morning, looking in the mirror at his swollen face, Jacob realized. It was as if he had been sleeping all these days in reality, and now he had woken up in a new, monstrously empty reality. The days after the funeral merged into a viscous, hopeless mass. Jacob quit his job a week after his wife's death, or rather, it was formalized as agreement of the parties, but everyone understood what his voluntary departure meant. His boss, Richards, initially offered his condolences and a couple of weeks of extra vacation. But when Jacob returned to the office for a day to sign the necessary paperwork, he felt he was no longer welcome. His colleagues avoided eye contact. Conversations broke off as soon as he approached. The HR department stared at him as if he were a ghost. Apparently, rumors had spread. Perhaps someone at the hospital had let slip the diagnosis, or they had found out through health insurance. Richards called him in. Hesitating and looking away, he began to talk about staff optimization and that the company would be forced to cut several positions. Jacob listened silently, looking somewhere past his boss. He didn't care. He even felt relief when he signed the resignation papers. He no longer had to pretend that his old life was still possible. On the day he was picking up his things from the office, only Mike approached him. His friend looked awkward and embarrassed. "Sorry, buddy," he muttered. "I didn't know anything, honestly." Jacob just shrugged. "Let's move on." Mike put his hand in his pocket, then changed his mind and timidly patted Jacob on the shoulder. "You hold on, okay? If anything happens, call me." "Yeah," Jacob said expressionlessly, closing his belongings with an empty box. He knew he wouldn't call, and Mike probably didn't want him to either, since he'd pulled back too timidly when Jacob had turned slightly toward him, as if he were afraid of catching the infection through touch. When Jacob quit his job, he felt for the first time how fragile everything he thought was. His career, his friends, all of it dissipated as soon as his life began to crack. Over the next few weeks, it became clear he was now an outcast. His mother called only once, briefly to check on his well-being. Her voice was shaky, and his father could be heard whispering anxiously in the background. They never asked directly, but they had apparently heard about the diagnosis. "Maybe it's better for you not to come for Easter, son," the mother said hesitantly at the end of the conversation. "You need to rest, to come to your senses. And your sister has children, you understand." "Of course," Jacob answered dully. "I'm not coming." His parents didn't call again. After hanging up, Jacob sat motionless for a long time with the phone in his hand. It felt like his heart had been doused with ice water. His own mother, the only person from whom he subconsciously expected unconditional support, had essentially asked him to stay away, to avoid problems for his sister and children. He did not blame her. Fear did its job. But the realization that the family home was now closed to him crushed him completely. He was banished from his parents' love, too. Close friends seemed to disappear. Someone sent a condolence message on the day of the funeral, and that was it. Jacob tried a couple of numbers, an old college friend, a former neighbor, but they didn't answer, or the conversation quickly degenerated into awkward silence. Everyone seemed afraid of him, either as if he were a leper or simply didn't know what to say. A month after Lily's death, Jacob realized he couldn't live in their apartment any longer. Every single thing there screamed about her: her mug on the shelf, her brush with hairs stuck in it, a half-read book abandoned on the nightstand. At night, he heard her cough in the silence and saw her silhouette in the corner. Time after time, he woke up, calling for her out of habit, and only the cold, empty bed reminded him that no one was around. He began methodically packing everything into boxes. He folded Lily's clothes for charity, though he had to press each item to his face, inhaling the last of her scent before putting them away. The photo albums went to the bottom of a large box. He couldn't bear to look at their happy smiles, caught on camera just a year ago. Some things he simply threw into the trash bin on the street without sorting them out, so, along with the junk, went their wedding glasses, which Lily had been saving, and even her wedding dress. It was hanging in a case, still smelling of the sea and her perfume. Jacob did not dare open it. He simply shoved the rolled-up case deeper and slammed the container shut, as if putting an end to it. In the end, their small shared property was divided into 3 parts: what to sell, what to give away, and what to keep. He kept almost nothing for himself, only a framed photo of him and Lily kissing against the backdrop of the sunset. The picture had been taken by a stranger on their honeymoon. Jacob put the photo at the very bottom of his bag, deciding not to take it out for now it was too painful. Luckily, they were renting the apartment, not owning it, so after handing over the keys to the landlord and breaking the lease early, Jacob walked out into the street with 2 suitcases and a bag. The elderly landlord stood at the threshold, usually a talkative Italian, but now silent and tense. He slammed the door quickly as Jacob took a step toward the exit. Even he had apparently heard the rumors. Jacob checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of Queens. The room was tiny and musty, a creaky bed, a moldy spot on the ceiling, a battered dresser. Outside, the highway roared around the clock. But he didn't care. He dumped his things in the corner and collapsed on the bed, staring at the peeling ceiling. Thus began a new life, if it could be called life. Jacob's days began to resemble each other. In the morning, he was awakened by the noise of cars, and the pain in his stomach made itself known. Gastritis had developed from nerves and insomnia. By some strange coincidence, he still did not feel the obvious symptoms of his infection physically, at least. But internally, it was as if he had already died along with Lily. Almost no one visited him. Once a week, a nurse from the clinic called to remind him to come in for an appointment and start taking HIV medication. Jacob half-heartedly promised, but never showed up. The medications were in his bag, where he had put them after being discharged from the hospital. The thought of swallowing a bitter pill every day, reminding him of his wife's betrayal, was disgusting. Besides, what difference did it make to live a few years longer? For what? Jacob spent hours wandering around the city to kill time. He had nowhere to hurry. He walked along endless streets, crossed bridges over noisy highways, and went into deserted parks. On weekdays, New York was seething with life. Crowds of hurrying people, shop window lights, street musicians. But Jacob wandered through this boiling cauldron like a ghost, invisible and alien. He could walk down Madison Avenue or Broadway without being aware of the way. A bright yellow taxi would pass by, screeching its brakes. A couple in love on the sidewalk would laugh and kiss under the same umbrella. A vendor at a van would shout invitingly, "Hot dogs, fresh hot dogs." All of this would fly past his clouded vision like frames from a silent film. The world continued to spin, shine, and make noise, as if mocking his grief. Jacob watched children launch boats into the pond in Central Park and felt that he was standing on the other side of the glass, cut off by an invisible barrier. Sometimes, sitting on a bench in a crowded park, he looked at the faces of those passing by and caught himself thinking, "But no one knows that I will die soon. For them, I am just another passerby." The city, once native and beloved, has now become alien and indifferent. Jacob began to notice details that he would not have paid attention to before. How a homeless man, covered with newspapers, spends the night near a luxurious display case, behind which mannequins and diamonds are. How a waiter in a cafe disgustedly picks up a used napkin from the table, as if afraid of catching an infection. What if the person who wiped themselves with it had AIDS? The signs of the clubs where he and Lily had once gone to dance flickered around him, but now they seemed like sets from a past life he could no longer access. Late at night, he would climb the Brooklyn Bridge and stand for hours, looking out over the dark waters of the East River. The lights of the skyscrapers trembled in the river like 1,000 broken hopes. Why didn't the world collapse along with mine? He thought, listening to the hum of cars behind him. People were laughing, arguing on the phone. Someone was taking pictures against the backdrop of night Manhattan, and inside Jacob, there was a scorched desert. In the evenings, he sat in his little room, drinking cheap whiskey straight from the bottle and trying not to think. But the thoughts came on their own, heavy, sticky. He argued with Lily in the void, shouted at her, sometimes threw a glass or an ashtray at the wall. The motel owner knocked a couple of times, threatening to throw him out for making noise. Jacob froze in response, and then continued drinking in silence. Nightmares visited him at night. He dreamed of Lily, sometimes healthy and laughing, calling him to follow her, sometimes dead, rotting in a grave, stretching out her hands to him. Jacob woke up in a cold sweat, with a wild scream, and for a long time could not understand where he was. One particularly lonely evening, Jacob, quite drunk, suddenly realized that he was talking out loud in an empty room as if to Lily. He came to his senses with a bitter smile, went crazy. In response, the silence pressed on his temples. Then he decided on a desperate step. He pulled an old notebook and a pen out of the nightstand. If there was no one to talk to, he would write. He would write to her. The sheet trembled in his unsteady hands in the dim light of the lamp. Jacob wrote at the top. Lily, his throat tightened, but he forced himself to pour out everything that was tearing him apart from the inside onto paper. Lily, I don't know if you can read my thoughts where you are now. It's unlikely. That's why I write on paper, although I understand that you will never see it. I'm angry with you. And I miss you. These two feelings tear me apart every day. Why did you do this? Why did you leave me so cruelly, even if it wasn't on purpose? I'm trying to understand, honestly. I'm trying to remember the good you. How you laughed, danced, how we dreamed of a home of children. God, children. It's so good that we didn't have them, they would have only gotten my and your curse. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to write nasty things. It's just that it hurts me so much, Lily. You were everything to me, and you turned out to be my undoing. But you died too. I don't know who to direct my rage at. At those men? At you? At myself for not saving our love? Probably a little bit of everyone. In your last moments, I held your hand and told myself that I forgive you. I thought I could let go of the pain and move on with my life, like I promised you. But I don't live, Lily. Every day I feel dead. No one wants to know me. No one needs me, and soon I'll die from the very disease you brought. Why do I need all this? Why wake up tomorrow? I'm tired. If there is even a drop of mercy where you are, forgive me for these bitter words, and farewell. Your Jacob. The pen slipped from his fingers. The page blurred before his eyes, and Jacob didn't immediately realize that tears were dripping onto the ink. He leaned back against the headboard, clasping his fist over his mouth to keep from sobbing out loud. A hurricane of emotion raged in his chest. The letter was bitter, unfair like their fate itself. Jacob closed his eyes, feeling completely empty. He didn't know if he was making the burden easier or more painful. The notebook remained open to the page covered in rambling farewells. Sometimes he thought, why not just end it now? Why wait for the painful denouement of the disease? To follow her path, perhaps to reunite with her there in oblivion. At such moments, the only thing that held him back was the stubborn spark, the promise he had made to Lily. Live on, don't give up, he heard her weak voice from the deathbed oblivion. Jacob ground his teeth at the memory. Why did she make him promise that he would now drag out a miserable existence? She didn't care anymore, and he had to pay. One particularly dark day, Jacob decided to end it all. It was a quiet Sunday morning, when the city outside the window seemed to be dead. He had not slept all night, drinking glass after glass. Alcohol no longer affected him, his body had gotten used to it, and he drank, in fact, for the ritual. Deep down, the decision had matured a long time ago, but that morning it seemed especially simple and natural. Jacob took out the very same pills that the doctors had prescribed for him from the nightstand. Antiretrovirals, antibiotics, antidepressants. He poured a handful of multicolored pills into his palm. It was strange that no one was monitoring whether he was taking them. The system had apparently given up on yet another hopeless patient. Well, that's great. He laid the pills out in a neat row on the bedside table. Then he went into the bathroom and filled a glass of water. He looked at his reflection in the murky mirror, an unshaven, haggard face with dull eyes like a ghost of his former self. Enough, he thought. I have nothing to wait for. Returning, he sat down on the bed. He took the first handful of pills, threw his head back, tried to swallow them all at once, but his dry throat spasmed against them. Several capsules fell into his lap. Jacob brushed them onto the floor with hatred. He tried again, shoving one into his mouth and washing them down with water. The bitter, chemical taste spread across his tongue. Suddenly, a photograph caught his eye, the one he had never taken out of his bag, but which was now accidentally peeking out from behind the zipper. he young and happy hugging Lily on the ocean shore. They were laughing, the waves were splashing around them. Alive. Jacob's hand shook. He closed his eyes, feeling the pills lodge in his esophagus. Lily's face appeared in his mind's eye, not the dying, tortured one, but the old, beloved one. Live. Don't give up, her lips whispered in memory. Damn. He croaked, clutching the glass. Damn. He stood up abruptly, knocking the glass over onto the floor. It shattered, splashes of water mixing with the shards. Jacob coughed, trying to spit out what he had already swallowed. His heart pounded in his chest with panic. He suddenly realized that doesn't want to die. At least not like this, in a solitary motel cell, unwanted by anyone. He vomited on the floor next to the shards. Bitter bile and multicolored fragments of half-digested tablets stained the carpet. Jacob fell to his knees, coughing, and burst into sobs loud, whining like a wounded animal. He crawled to the wall, leaned his back against the cold panel, and burst into tears, covering his face with his hands. That was how the morning found him. The heavy curtains parted, letting in a strip of gray light that slid across the wrecked room: bottles, medicine, vomit on the floor, and a huddled man. When the flow of tears had dried up, Jacob raised his head, wiping his wet face with his sleeve. There was a frightening emptiness in his soul, but through it came something else, a faint, barely perceptible determination. If he wasn't going to die now, then he had to do something with the days that remained. He looked around the room with bleary eyes. His gaze fell on a crumpled newspaper clipping lying near the wastebasket. Jacob picked it up automatically. It was a piece of local newspaper in which he had once wrapped a bottle. A photograph stared out from the clipping, a group of people, volunteers in hospital gowns, hugging each other and smiling. The headline read, "Hospice Hope is a place where even the doomed are not abandoned." Jacob vaguely remembered buying a newspaper a few days ago to look for job openings. He hadn't found any, but his eyes had caught this article. It was about a facility for terminally ill people that helped homeless people with HIV and abandoned families. He'd read it with a bitter smile, like who cared about the doomed except for the outcasts like themselves. But now the article seemed to call out to him. He ran through the lines again and caught sight of the name of the volunteer coordinator, Anna Morrison, and the address of a hospice on the outskirts of the city. At the end of the note it read, "Assistant workers are needed sanitary care, and most importantly, human participation." Jacob chuckled quietly, not believing himself assistant to the dying. Who else but he could have played this role? He himself would soon have to go there. Maybe he could at least do something useful before the end. He rose to his feet, feeling dizzy from the night's drinking and stress. Staggering, he took the most decent clothes he had left from the closet, dark jeans and a clean shirt. He put them on and buttoned them up with trembling fingers. He glanced at himself in the mirror. He looked like crap pale, with shadows under his eyes, a week-old stubble, but that didn't matter now. Jacob picked up the newspaper clipping, folded it carefully, and put it in his pocket. Then he put on his jacket and stepped toward the door, trying not to look at the chaos he had left behind. He knew he would either walk out now, out of this little room, out of this pit of despair, or he would stay here forever. He chose the first one. Hospice Hope was housed in an old 3-story building that had once belonged to a church on the outskirts of the Bronx. When Jacob approached him along the deserted morning street, his heart was pounding as if before an exam. He stopped at the porch and reread the sign with its faded letters, Hope Hospice, and below, in Russian, written in marker, Hope. The red brick building itself seemed to radiate fatigue, but there was a light in the windows. Jacob pushed open the heavy oak door hesitantly. The smell of a hospital hit him, disinfectant mixed with something sweet and medicinal. The small reception area was dimly lit. There was no one at the reception desk. He hesitated, not knowing where to go. He coughed quietly and called out, "Hey, is there anyone here?" Silence answered, except for the beeping of a machine somewhere in the distance. Jacob looked around. The walls were decorated with children's drawings and faded posters with inspirational quotes. On the table lay a stack of brochures about caring for the terminally ill. "Do you need help?" A female voice suddenly came from the right. Jacob winced. A woman in her 30s with a shock of dark brown hair pulled into a loose bun came out of a side door. She wore a white coat over jeans and a simple t-shirt. Her face was a little tired, but open, with a slight smile on her lips. Her eyes were green and attentive, looking at the guest with a searching gaze. Jacob cleared his throat. I'm here about volunteering. I need Anna Morrison. The woman responded by raising her eyebrows, then smiling a little wider. It's me. Jacob was embarrassed, realizing that this was the volunteer coordinator from the article. He had expected someone older, stern, but Anna looked younger than him and not at all stern. Nice to meet you, he murmured. My name is Jacob. Jacob Gray. I saw an ad in the paper. Anna nodded understandingly. Oh yes, the article came out last week. I'm so glad you responded, Mr. Gray. Just Jacob will do, he quietly interjected. Okay, Jacob, she said, looking at him again, appraisingly but not judgingly. Come in, let's sit down. Anna led him into a small room off the hall, a sort of office or lounge. There was a worn leather couch and a couple of chairs. On the table was a coffee maker and a stack of papers. Anna motioned Jacob to a chair and sat down opposite him, crossing her arms. Is this your first time volunteering? She began softly. Jacob nodded. Yes, I used to work in an office and didn't do anything like this. Anna smiled understandingly. Nothing. As they say, there is a first time for everyone. What made you come to us? She tilted her head slightly, studying him carefully. Jacob felt his throat tighten. What prompted? He looked down at his hands clasped in his lap. I read the article, and... He swallowed, choosing his words. Should he tell the truth? Although what difference does it make now? I have. The right experience, you could say. Anna frowned slightly, not understanding. Jacob exhaled and said with difficulty, My wife died of AIDS a few weeks ago. In the silence that followed, the ticking of a small wall clock could be heard. Anna did not look away, did not flinch, only deep sympathy was reflected in her eyes. I'm so sorry for your loss, she said quietly. Jacob nodded, grateful for the lack of unnecessary emotion. Usually people were either horrified or embarrassed. Anna seemed to understand everything without words. And you too? She asked unobtrusively, Are you also HIV positive? Jacob forced himself to look up. Yes, also. Anna leaned back in her chair and took a slow breath. There was a hint of sadness in her eyes, but no surprise. Then you really know what our wards go through. Jacob smiled bitterly. Unfortunately. Are you in therapy? Came the next delicate question. Not yet, he admitted. The doctors prescribed it, but I haven't started yet. Anna nodded understandingly. I understand. It can be hard to accept right away, but promise me that you'll think about treatment. There are excellent drugs now. You can live a long and relatively healthy life. We'll see, Jacob answered evasively. Anna clearly wanted to say more, but she bit her lip and held back. She switched to a working tone. Good. We are always short of hands. The work is varied. Some help clean the wards, some talk to patients, accompany them on walks in the yard. What would you like to do? Jacob was even taken aback by such a question. He assumed that they would simply tell him what to do. I don't know. Whatever it takes, I'm ready to learn. Anna smiled approvingly. Excellent. Let's start with something simple. Today, I'll introduce you to the situation, and then we'll see. She stood up, motioning for Jacob to follow her. Come with me. I'll show you who's where. They went back out into the corridor. Anna led him down the long corridor of the first floor, showing him the rooms. In some doors, he caught a glimpse of people lying on beds, coughing groans. His heart sank. Everything reminded him of Lily's last days. Anna quietly said, There are words here. The hospice is designed for 20 beds in total. 16 are currently occupied. These are mainly people with late-stage HIV infection. Many are former homeless or those who have been abandoned by their families. There are also patients with oncology, also in the terminal stage. We do not divide. Everyone who needs it is welcome. Jacob glanced at her furtively. The phrase, "everyone is welcome," sounded so sincere from her that he involuntarily felt respect. They went up to the second floor. Anna continued. On the second floor, there are wards for those who can move around on their own or at least sit in a wheelchair. There is also a small library and a recreation room. They peered into a spacious but modestly furnished room. A few soft chairs, a shelf with books, a TV, a table for board games. A couple of patients were sitting inside. An elderly woman in a headscarf was quietly reading something. A young guy, thin, with tattoos on his arms, was looking out the window. They glanced at the people passing by, and Anna smiled warmly at each one. "Good morning, Mrs. Wilson." "Hello, Chris." The old lady nodded weakly, and the guy grinned for a moment at the corner of his mouth. Anna, going back out into the corridor, quietly explained to Jacob. "Mrs. Wilson has lung cancer, unfortunately, in its final stages. No relatives. And Chris is our HIV patient, a former addict from the street. He is 25, but alas, they realized it too late. He has many concomitant diseases." Jacob felt a lump in his throat. 25, still a boy. Anna seemed to read his thoughts. It's natural to feel sorry for them, but try not to take everything too seriously. Otherwise, it's hard to work here. They continued their inspection. Anna showed the nurse's station, the utility room where the medicines were kept, the kitchenette where volunteers could bring food or tea. The entire hospice exuded a homely aura. Soft music was playing somewhere, potted plants were blooming on the windowsills. However, under this apparent cozy simplicity, tension was felt. The air was saturated with pain and hope at the same time. Finally, Anna led Jacob to a slightly open door at the end of the corridor. "I think we'll start by introducing one of our tenants. He could use some company." She knocked quietly and looked in. "Mr. Phillips, may I come in?" A hoarse male voice was heard. "Come in, since you've come." Anna gestured to Jacob inside. The room was for one person. On a bed raised on mechanical supports, a thin, pale man was half lying. He looked to be about 50, but Jacob knew that the disease easily added decades. The man had sunken cheeks, a head almost bald, only gray fluff on the sides. However, his eyes alive, tenacious, immediately stared at those who entered. "Good morning, Henry," Anna said pleasantly. "Here, meet our new volunteer. His name is Jacob." Mr. Phillips apparently chuckled, and Henry nodded slightly to Jacob. "Hello, newbie." "Hello, Mr. Phillips," Jacob said politely, coming closer. He noticed a sign by the bed, "Henry Phillips, 62. Henry waved his hand. "Just call me Henry. Everyone here calls everyone by their first names. Why stand on ceremony when you're 1 foot in the grave?" Anna gently scolded. "Well, Henry, here you go again with your dark wit." Henry smiled at the corner of his mouth. "What's left, my dear?" He turned his gaze to Jacob. "So are you staying with us for a long time, or what?" Jacob hesitated. "I would like to help in any way I can." Okay, Henry drawled, squinting one eye. "Just know this, I don't need your pity. I hate it when people look at me with calf-like eyes." Jacob was even taken aback by the patient's directness, but Anna gently placed her hand on his elbow. "Everything is fine. Henry is a straightforward but kind person." "Of course," the old man muttered, but his eyes softened a little. "Okay, let the guy sit down. He'll entertain the old man with conversation." Anna gestured to Jacob to sit down on the chair by the bed. He sat down obediently, feeling his insides tighten at the sight of Henry. Lily came to mind too vividly, just as exhausted and pale. "I'll be back soon," Anna whispered to Jacob. "Stay with him, just chat." Jacob nodded. Anna left, closing the door behind her. There was an awkward pause. Henry leaned back against the pillows, looking at the newcomer. "Well, ask what you wanted to ask," he suddenly said. "What do you mean?" Jacob didn't understand. Henry grinned, revealing sparse teeth. "Usually newbies all ask the same thing. What's wrong with me? And how did I get to this point? Don't drag it out. Ask your questions. Jacob was embarrassed. Sorry, I didn't mean to be tactless. Ha, Henry snorted. Here, boy, the word tactlessness died before us. We all know everything about each other. For example, I see you're not a local yourself, right? Well-fed appearance, intelligent face. Didn't come from the street. Jacob didn't expect such observation. Well, yes, I'm from Manhattan. Bogative, then Henry smiled wryly. And what brought this Manhattan gentleman here? Are you looking for the meaning of life, I suppose? Jacob looked down. Maybe. Henry chuckled. Well, they find him here sometimes. Just watch out, don't kick the bucket too early. He leaned forward a little, lowering his voice. You don't look so good. All white, like a toadstool. Jacob shrugged. I slept poorly. The old man nodded understandingly and suddenly asked. Also HIV. Jacob looked up, stunned. W. Why do you think so? Henry chuckled. I have a nose. And Anna brought you to me. She usually sends newcomers to me or to Marta. We are, so to speak, local psychologists here, checking whether a person is suitable or will run away. After all, many of us get scared and run away. So, did I pass the test? Jacob smiled wryly. Why don't you just sit there for now? Henry chuckled, but suddenly began coughing. Jacob leaned forward, but the sick man waved him off, catching his breath. It's okay, it happens. So, answer the question. Jacob realized that there was no point in hiding it. Yes, I have HIV. Henry clicked his tongue. You're still young. Do you take any medication? Not yet, Jacob answered wearily, but I'm thinking about starting. Go ahead, son, the old man said seriously. It's too late for me in my time, and they'll probably pull you out. Why die in vain? Jacob was surprised by the unexpected concern. Thank you. I'll try. Henry leaned his head back against the pillows, closing his eyes briefly. Then he spoke again, looking at the ceiling. Do you know how I ended up in jail? I thought I'd never get caught, a Terminator. I was a long-haul truck driver. I traveled all over the country. I drank. There were chicks on the tracks. Well, I partied too much. About 5 years ago, I found out I was positive. But it was too late. My liver, kidneys, everything, goodbye youth. By that time, my wife had run away when she found out about the diagnosis. My son is an adult, but he also turned away. I wandered around alone until volunteers picked me up. Otherwise, I would have been lying under the fence. Jacob listened to Henry's confession, feeling a strange kinship. The stories were different, but the ending was the same: illness and loneliness. Why are you here? Henry changed the subject. We always do it out of stupidity, some for women, some for the needle. How did you end up here? Jacob tensed up. But seeing that the old man was asking without malice, just out of interest, he quietly answered. My wife cheated on me, brought me an infection. She died recently. Henry whistled. Wow, I sympathize, man. Betrayal is the most painful thing. Jacob gave a forced smile. That's for sure. The old man was silent for a moment, then said hoarsely, But you know what I'll tell you? Since you and I are already dead on a varnished bench. He nodded at his covers. Then there's no place for offense here. Forgive her. You can't turn things around anyway. Forgive and live as long as you're allotted. Jacob didn't know what to say. He looked away, feeling a lump in his throat as a stranger said what he struggled with alone at night. Should he forgive Lily? Let go of his anger? Probably yes, otherwise he couldn't go on living. The door creaked. Anna returned with a tray. There was a mug of broth and a glass of juice. Henry, I brought you a snack, she announced cheerfully. And you guys are great. Have you met? Of course, the old man muttered, but it was clear he was glad to see her. Your newbie is smart. Leave him with me, he'll come in handy. Anna laughed quietly. Well, Henry, he's here to help everyone, not just you. So I'm not everyone? Henry squinted slyly, taking the mug from her hands. Okay. Thank you, dear. Anna placed a pillow under his back, helping him to sit more comfortably. Jacob watched how carefully and naturally she treated the patient as if he were her own. Henry took a sip of soup and smacked his lips contentedly. Wow, good. Anna, you are our angel, delicious as always. Of course, she smiled. Half an hour later, they left Henry. The old man was beginning to feel sleepy after eating and talking. He waved cheerfully to Jacob as he said goodbye. Drop by again, boy. I'll teach you how to play dominoes, so you won't get bored. Of course, Henry, Jacob replied with a warmth he hadn't felt in himself for a long time. In the corridor, Anna turned to him. How are you? Aren't you scared yet? Jacob shook his head. No, Henry is unusual. I'm glad I met him. Anna looked pleased. He's our favorite. An old sailor, he says. Never a dull moment with him. She looked at Jacob intently. Thank you for telling him about yourself. I think it did you both good. Jacob was a little embarrassed. And you? How do you know what we talked about? Anna smiled slyly. Henry is speaking loudly, and I left the door slightly open. Not on purpose, of course. A mischievous glimmer appeared in her eyes, but yes, I overheard a little. Jacob couldn't help but smile slightly. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to him with such kind humor. You're doing well, Anna praised. Today, I think, is enough for the first day. There are probably a lot of impressions. Only now did Jacob realize that only an hour or two had passed, but it felt like a whole day. The emotions, the people, the conversations after the isolation of the motel, it was like jumping into icy water, sobering and frightening. I suppose so, he admitted. Let me go down and see you off, Anna suggested. We'll fill out a small volunteer form at the same time, otherwise you and I will immediately rush into work. They went back down to the lobby. An elderly woman administrator was now sitting behind the counter. Anna introduced her as Maria. On the way, she only nodded to Jacob with a routine smile. Having filled out the form with his data and contacts, Jacob even thought about which of his relatives to indicate for emergency contact, and after a pause, left Mike's number. Although he was unlikely to be pleased, Anna took off her robe and remained in casual clothes. She looked simple and cute. Dark blue jeans, a green t-shirt, a plastic badge hanging on a lanyard. Listen, she suddenly said at the exit. Let's have some coffee. You've been through so much today, it wouldn't hurt to unwind. Jacob didn't expect such a proposal. He hesitated. I don't know if I'll interfere with your work. Anna waved her hand. I'm on a break right now. And besides, we're covering for each other here. They won't refuse me 5 minutes of coffee. She wanted it so sincerely that Jacob could not refuse. Fine. A few minutes later, they were sitting on the steps of the hospice, holding paper cups from the coffee machine. The street was almost deserted. This industrial area is quiet on weekends. A weak sun was breaking through the clouds. Anna pushed a strand of hair from her face and looked at Jacob. How are you? After everything? I mean your wife. Jacob looked down at the steaming coffee. I'm coping, as best I can. It's already better than it was before. Anna nodded understandingly. It's obvious. Today, while you were talking to Henry, you seemed to come to life a little. Forgive me if this is too personal. No, you're right, he admitted. I really was, like in a dream for a long time, or a nightmare. I know what it's like, she said quietly. Jacob glanced sideways at her. Anna was slowly turning her glass in her hands, her gaze directed somewhere into the distance toward the cracked asphalt. Have you lost someone too? He asked cautiously. Anna was silent for a few seconds, then answered quietly. Yes, I was betrayed too, and I was in your place too. Jacob felt his insides turn over. You, too. Anna forced a weak smile, but her eyes remained sad. Yes, my ex-fiancé. Let's just say he liked to have sex on the side. The result is that I've been HIV positive for 7 years now. Jacob let out a shocked breath. Could two people with such similar fates really meet? He barely found the words. And how are you with this? Anna looked straight at him, and there was steel in that look. I did it. I got out of that darkness, although it wasn't easy. Her lips curved into a smile. And now I'm trying to help others get out. Jacob shook her hand carefully. You really did it. You are incredibly strong. Anna shook her head. The people around me made me strong. If I were alone, I would probably have disappeared. She looked at him carefully. And how do you cope with resentment? To your wife? At fate. Jacob looked down at the black surface of the coffee. I don't know. I was so angry at first. At Lily, at myself, at the whole world. Then this anger just burned out. There was emptiness left. And when I met all of you here, he smiled with the corner of his mouth. I stopped being angry. Who do I have to prove anything to? Lily is gone, and anger won't bring her back. Anna quietly agreed. True. Anger burns out, leaving either bitterness or humility. It seems you chose the latter. Jacob sighed. I try. Sometimes I think, maybe I forgive too easily. But in Lily's last minutes, I saw before me not a traitor, but a frightened, dying person. I simply could not hold a grudge. And perhaps it is better this way. Anna covered his palm with hers. That's better. Hatred only destroys first of all the one who hates. Jacob looked at her warmly. You know, before I met you, I thought my life was over. And now I'm sitting here drinking coffee, and for the first time in a long time I feel calm. Thank you. Anna smiled confusedly. What does it have to do with me? It's all your fault. You just gave yourself a chance. No, he said softly, not myself. He squeezed her fingers, briefly but meaningfully. Anna froze for a moment, then responded with a squeeze. No more words were needed. A few days later, Jacob found Chris, the tattooed guy, sitting alone by the break room window. It was drizzling outside, and Chris was looking sullenly at the gray sky. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his cheekbones were even more pointed. Hey, can I come in? Jacob asked quietly, coming over. Chris shrugged, not objecting. Jacob sat down next to him, and for a while they stared at the rain streaks on the glass in silence. The doctor said I have a month left. Chris suddenly squeezed out hoarsely, without taking his eyes off the window. A month, Carl. I didn't even have time to live. Jacob looked at him. There was no anger or fear in his voice, only bitter weariness. I'm sorry, he said sincerely. Chris grinned at the corner of his mouth. What's so sad? It's your own fault. You shot up with whatever you could find, lived like a moron. HIV, hepatitis, the whole bunch. There's no one left. No friends, no girlfriends. As soon as they found out, they ran away. She doesn't even call her mother. He bit his lip, hiding a tremor. Jacob gently placed his hand on his bony shoulder. You are not alone, Chris. We are here with you. The guy shook his head and snorted ironically. Who are you? You and your sister Anna? So you are out of pity. No, Jacob interrupted firmly. Not out of pity, out of solidarity. You know, I have HIV too. Chris turned around in surprise. Seriously? You wouldn't say. Jacob smiled bitterly. Disease does not choose. I also lost almost everyone. Chris narrowed his eyes. Did you also inject? No. It's a long story. But the result is the same. A bunch of people ran away. Chris nodded slowly, digesting what he had heard. He was silent for a moment, then asked quietly, And how is it not to be afraid? They tell me, don't be afraid, you're not alone, but what's the point? It's scary to die like this at 25. Jacob's heart sank. What could he say? He was afraid too. But Anna was with him now. These people were just like him. It's scary, Jacob said honestly. But when you accept it, it gets easier. We'll all leave, sooner or later. We just know when. And that makes every minute more valuable, you know. Chris chuckled. These minutes are rotting within four walls. Not every one, Jacob objected softly. This one is quite nice. We're sitting here, listening to the rain, alive. Chris looked at him and suddenly smiled weakly. Probably, yes, alive. Jacob took a candy out of his pocket and handed it to the guy. The last one, You can't have a lot of sweets, but today you can. Chris took the caramel and threw it into his mouth. Thanks. Hey, your name is Jake, right? Listen. Listen, Jake. If I ever freak out or get too worked up, will you talk to me? For the first time, Jacob saw not detachment, but timid hope in Chris's gaze. He nodded. Of course. Anytime. Chris looked away, looking at the glass, where two human figures were now reflected, not so lonely as long as they were next to each other. The rain continued to pound the window, but a barely noticeable warmth was already flaring up inside from the simple understanding shared between two outcasts. Several months passed. Jacob came to the hospice almost every day. During this time, he got used to it. He was no longer afraid of sharp cries of pain from the wards. He did not get confused if someone suddenly got worse. He learned to change sheets, measure temperature, and give light massages to those who suffered from bed sores. Most of all, he listened to the patient's stories, shared his thoughts. And although his own story was familiar to few, except for Henry and Anna, no one knew the details the patients felt. This volunteer is one of them, he understands. Anna noticed changes in Jacob. He became more lively, even outwardly transformed. He gained the lost weight. A slight blush appeared on his cheeks. His gaze became clearer. One day, sorting out medicines in the utility room, she casually asked, "How are your pills? Do you take them regularly?" Jacob smiled as he helped place the jars of formula on the shelf. Like a bayonet, didn't miss a single dose. Anna happily patted him on the shoulder. "Well done. Have you had any tests done recently?" "Last week," he nodded. "The doctor said the viral load was decreasing." Anna hugged him sincerely, unable to restrain her impulse. "I'm so glad." Jacob laughed, embarrassed but happy. "Your merit in this is no less than mine." She pulled back, looking into his eyes. "No, it was you who decided to live. I was just walking next to you." Their gazes locked for a moment, warm green and soft brown. Jacob suddenly realized that he had been hopelessly in love with this woman for a long time. Not as a savior or a friend, as a woman with all his soul. And judging by the way her eyelashes fluttered as they fell, he was not alone in this feeling. But neither of them was in a hurry to voice the obvious. The world they had built seemed too fragile, the meaning of their days, woven from caring for others and quietly supporting each other. It seemed that if they only stepped over the edge of friendship, everything could change. One evening, Jacob experienced his first grief with Anna. Mrs. Wilson died, the same old lady with lung cancer he had noticed on his first day at the hospice. She had been sitting in a chair by the window, wrapped in a colorful woolen blanket, with a surprisingly clear gaze, as if she already knew how this story would end and was not afraid. Jacob talked to her often. He read newspapers to her, brought her tiny oranges, listened to her reminisce about her children who had long since stopped calling, and about her husband who had died 2 decades before her. He held her hand when she was scared at night. In 3 months, he had become more attached to this wise, humble woman than he had ever expected. In the last hours of Mrs. Wilson, Jacob was next to Anna. The room was half dark, smelled of chamomile and medicine. Anna moved quietly between the Roman IV and the bed, giving painkiller injections, adjusting the blanket. She had a special, almost sacred peace in these movements, tenderness and firmness at the same time. The old woman left quietly, almost unnoticed. She simply stopped breathing, squeezing the hands of 2 people at once, the volunteer and the nurse. The monitor gave a short beep and gave a direct line. That's it. There was such silence that it seemed as if the whole world held its breath. Jacob sat still, squeezing her hand, still warm. He looked at Anna and for the first time saw her cry. Silently, like an adult, like those who have held too much inside. She quickly wiped her tears with her sleeve, turning away as if ashamed. "Don't keep it to yourself," Jacob whispered. He stood up and came closer. She didn't resist when he gently hugged her, tightly, sincerely. She froze for just a moment and then pressed herself against him, her forehead resting on his shoulder. As if for the first time in a long time, she was suddenly allowed not to be strong. "I'm sorry," she muttered. "It's just, I knew this day would come. but every time I think I can handle it easier. You're doing fine, he replied. You're just a human being, not a machine. They stood like that for a few minutes, in an embrace, in silence, in memory of the woman who had left. Outside the window, it began to rain, warm and spring-like. Anna was the first to pull away, but not right away, and there was something new in her gaze. Warmth, openness, vulnerability. They stood like that over the cooling body, hugging, until the doctors came to confirm death. That night, after completing all the paperwork and calling the funeral service, Anna invited Jacob to come to her. "I don't want you to be alone now," she said quietly, touching his wrist with trembling fingers. Jacob himself didn't want to be alone with his grief. Mrs. Wilson's death stirred up memories of Lily, of that night in the hospital. He just nodded. They took a taxi to Anna's small rental apartment, a cozy studio on the third floor of an old building in Queens. They barely spoke on the way, each digesting what had happened. At Anna's house, Jacob sat down on the sofa and only then realized how exhausted he was, both emotionally and physically. Anna had taken a shower and returned wearing a soft house jacket and sweatpants. She put the kettle on and, while heating the water, suddenly said, "Sometimes I'm scared, Jacob." He looked up at her. She was standing with her back to him, her hands resting on the sink. "What exactly?" he asked quietly. "That I will continue to live among the dead." Anna turned around, pressing her fists to her chest. "That everyone around me will leave one after another, and I will see them off, holding on, and inside, I will die off piece by piece with them." Jacob stood up and walked towards her. "You're not dying," he said softly. "You're giving them as much warmth as you can. It's keeping you warm, too." Anna shook her head, tears glistening on her eyelashes. "Not always. Today I feel empty, and I became afraid that one day there will be no one around who could fill me up again or something." She fell silent, searching for words. Jacob carefully hugged her. "I'm nearby." Anna closed her eyes, dropping tears onto his shirt. "Yes, thank you." They stood like that in the kitchen in the semi-darkness for a long time until the kettle whistled. Anna smiled through her tears and turned off the stove. "Shall we sit down?" They settled down next to each other on the sofa with cups of hot tea. The night city was noisy outside the window. Anna, covered with a blanket, quietly said, "Sometimes I think maybe I should give it all up. Go somewhere. Start over where they don't know who I am and what happened." "Don't say that," Jacob said. "Without you, so many people would die before their time. You're like a beacon to them." Anna smiled sadly. "Lighthouse. And who is it for me?" Jacob hesitated, then decided. He took her cup and placed it on the table next to his own. Then he turned to her and said very seriously, "I want to be someone for you, if you let me." Anna glanced sideways, not fully understanding. "You already mean so much to me, Jacob." "No, that's not it." He took her palm, damp and cold, and clasped it with both of his. "Anna." His voice wavered. He took a deep breath. "I was afraid to say it. I thought I would no longer have the right to such a feeling. But I love you." His heart was pounding in his ears, and Anna was looking at him with wide eyes. "You." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Jacob hurried. "Sorry. Maybe I shouldn't have." But Anna pressed her fingers to his lips, stopping the excuses. Something long suppressed flashed in his green eyes. "Don't you dare apologize," she whispered. "You have no idea how long I've been waiting for you to say that." Before he could answer, her palms were on his cheeks, and she covered his lips with hers. That kiss contained everything: the despair of today's loss, fear, hope, and the nascent passion that had been standing at the threshold for a long time. Jacob hugged her tighter, responding so greedily, as if he was afraid of losing the ability to love again. They kissed until they ran out of air. Anna exhaled raggedly, pressing her forehead to his. "I love you, Jacob. I kept thinking that you weren't ready yet. I didn't rush you." He ran his hand through her hair, whispering, "I love you too." The words were drowned in kisses. The night was their ally, it sheltered them from the world, allowing them to forget. Jacob gently stroked Anna's back, feeling her heart beat faster. Their fears, illnesses, the past, everything retreated for a while. Later, lying next to her in the dark on Anna's narrow bed, Jacob listened to her breathing, even and calm. She had fallen asleep with her head on his chest, holding him as if she were afraid he would disappear. He kissed the top of her head gently. A warm wave of warmth spread through her chest, a warmth he had never thought he would ever experience. Love as redemption. He remembered the words he had once read. Well, maybe that was true. Anna hadn't just brought him back to life, she had given him something worth living for, even if the time allotted was short. Jacob closed his eyes, grateful for this unsolicited gift of loving and being loved in the hell that his old life had become. He was willing to accept any pain that lay ahead, if only to hold on to this happiness until the end. After that night, they began to spend more time together. Jacob noticed the way she looked at him a little longer than necessary, the way she smiled softer, the way she touched his hand a moment longer than before. She didn't say it out loud, but her eyes showed that she was beginning to fall in love with him, quietly, carefully, as if she was afraid that this feeling might frighten off that fragile, invisible thread that had connected them that night at Mrs. Wilson's last breath. In the weeks that followed, they tried to keep their relationship under wraps at the hospice, but everyone seemed to understand. Henry would wink at Jacob when Anna left the room, joking, "Hey, look, he didn't steal our volunteer boss. We'd be lost without her." Anna would laugh back, looking at Jacob with shining eyes. The patients seemed to be happy for them. In a place where the presence of death is felt daily, any spark of life is worth 3 times as much. Jacob continued to help, no longer considering himself a random visitor. He became part of this small community of the doomed and the saviors. Together with Anna, they spent quiet evenings in the hospice, discussing the condition of one of the patients, dreaming of opening their own shelter someday. Anna shared such a dream, and Jacob encouraged her. "We will definitely open it. I will be the financier. You are the heart of the project." They laughed, making plans, although both knew that the future was uncertain. And so another month passed. Autumn in New York was gathering strength. The trees were covered with red and yellow leaves, the streets were cool, the wind blew through their jackets, and the sky was clear and pale blue. Jacob and Anna sometimes took a day off, not according to schedule, just because they needed to breathe. Sometimes it was a walk in the park, a takeout coffee, a bench under the rustling trees. They just sat next to each other, holding hands and saying nothing. It didn't look special an ordinary couple, like hundreds of others. But for Jacob, these moments were everything. Peace, a sense of support, a respite from heavy thoughts. He felt almost normal, almost. But alone, the anxiety returned. He began to notice that in the mornings, the cough did not go away as quickly as before. Sometimes it was hard to breathe, especially on cold days. There was a feeling of pressure in his chest, not sharp, but persistent. A couple of times he woke up with a fever. He told himself that he had just caught a cold. It was autumn, the weather was changing normal. Anna noticed. Once, when he coughed while clearing away the dishes, she frowned. "Are you okay?" she asked, casually, but with a slight wariness in her voice. He nodded. "Yes, it's just that my throat is sore. Tea with honey, and I'll forget what happened." She didn't say anything. She just looked at him a little longer than usual. He didn't want her to worry. Not now. It was too fragile, too new. He knew that a few months of untreated time in the past could have left its mark. Maybe it already has. But he wasn't going to let it ruin what they had. He wasn't stupid. He knew he'd have to see a doctor, get tested, go back to therapy if necessary. But for now, he just wanted to live. Not as a patient, not as a carrier of a diagnosis, but as a man who had a woman in his life who could give him back the desire to get up in the morning. Every morning he felt a slight tension in front of the mirror, looking at himself, catching changes, looking for signals. And yet, he thanked fate for a new day. Not out loud, not seriously. He simply accepted. I'm still here, and so is she. That was enough. The first snow fell unexpectedly early, dusting the roofs of houses and the leaves that had not yet fallen. Jacob woke up early in the frosty morning from a sharp pain in his chest. It seemed as if someone had tied his ribs with a metal hoop, preventing him from breathing. He sat up in bed with difficulty, trying to drink water from a glass, but his hand was shaking so much that the water splashed. Anna was still asleep next to him, exhausted from the night shift. Jacob didn't want to wake her. He rose quietly, wrapped himself in a robe, and walked into the kitchen. Every breath he took was a burning sensation. The cough he had been suppressing for the past few days now burst out in a spasm. He clamped a towel over his mouth to muffle the sound. When the attack subsided, Jacob pulled the cloth away from his face and saw dark spots of blood. He felt weak and had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. A cold wave of fear rose up inside him. No, not now. Jacob, a frightened voice came from the bedroom. Where are you? He frantically rinsed the towel under the tap, trying to remove traces of blood and put on his usual smile. Here, in the kitchen, he answered as cheerfully as possible. Anna appeared on the threshold, disheveled from sleep, wearing a long t-shirt. Seeing his pale face and tense smile, she frowned. Are you feeling unwell? I'm fine, he answered too quickly. I just coughed a little. Anna came closer and looked into his eyes. Coughing again. And you're shaking. She touched his forehead with a warm hand and gasped. You have a fever. Jacob tried to pull away. Just a little. No big deal. But he was interrupted by another coughing fit. Anna supported him while he bent over, choking on a wet cough. When he straightened up, a fresh drop of blood was crimson on his lips. Anna turned pale. That's it, no more needs. Get ready. She almost forced him back into the bedroom to get dressed and rushed off to call someone. Jacob heard snatches of her worried whispers, probably to the hospice doctor, their colleague. Half an hour later, Anna was already driving him to the hospital in her car. Jacob, wrapped in a scarf, sank heavily into the seat. His head was spinning. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Anna's profile, her lips pressed together, glistening with tears, even though she was trying to hold on. He felt guilty. I'm sorry. For what? She snapped, not taking her eyes off the road. Don't talk nonsense. I didn't want to worry you, he said hoarsely. I thought it would go away on its own. Anna's eyes flashed angrily. Keeping silent about an illness is the worst thing you can do. You should have told me. Jacob lowered his head. I know. I'm sorry. Anna exhaled. Her hand lay on his palm above his knee. We'll figure it out later. The main thing is to get there quickly. They were already waiting for them in the admissions department of the infectious diseases clinic, where they went. Anna had called a doctor she knew. Jacob had some tests done, a chest X-ray. He saw the radiologist sadly shake his head while looking at the image, and his heart sank. Things were clearly bad. The diagnosis confirmed the fears. Bilateral pneumocystis pneumonia, the same one that affects people with immunodeficiency. Like Lily, flashed through his mind. Despite months of therapy, Jacob's immune system was still weak, and the disease was waiting for him at this moment. He was immediately admitted to hospital. Anna barely left his side while doctors placed Yves with antibiotics and an oxygen mask on his face. He saw her from behind the transparent dome of the mask. She tried to smile encouragingly, but her eyes betrayed horror and pain. The intensive care unit was sterile and impersonal. White walls, the flickering of instruments, the smell of antiseptic. Not like the cozy rooms of Nejda, decorated with drawings and flowers. Here, everything was subordinated to the cold necessity of fighting for life. And Jacob, through the fog of consciousness, thought how ironic. He was fighting his last battle not in that warm place where he had found new meaning, but among the cold shine of hospital steel. But next to him was Anna, the only thread connecting him now with the world of warmth and love. I'm not leaving, do you hear me? She said, squeezing his hand as he was settled into the intensive care unit. Not for a minute. He just nodded, too weak to speak. Every breath was labored, his chest wheezed. His head was splitting with heat, his temperature had risen above 40. The following days were a blur of half-sleeps and short periods of painful wakefulness for Jacob. He shivered, then flushed, and was on and off IVs. The oxygen mask made it nearly impossible to talk, and he had no energy. But every time he opened his eyes, he looked for only one thing, Anna, and she was always there, sitting by the bed or dozing in a chair with her head resting on his hand, or running to call the doctor when he got worse. One day he came to his senses from the muttering of voices and realized that they were talking about him. Anna and the attending physician were standing in the corner of the ward. "We are doing everything possible," the doctor said quietly, "but you understand." "I understand," Anna answered in a whisper. "But please, doctor, maybe there's something else we can do. Maybe transfer him to another clinic." "The protocol is the same everywhere," the doctor said, throwing up his hands. "Unfortunately, his CD4 level is almost zero. His body is not fighting. Antibiotics will do little." Jacob closed his eyes. He knew what he was hearing. They weren't sure he would survive. In fact, he could feel it himself. His strength was ebbing. The illness was coming like a black cloud, filling his lungs with fluid and pain. He wasn't afraid to die. He had looked death in the eye for a long time, working in a hospice. But one thought wouldn't let him go peacefully. Anna, how is she? He tried to move the fingers of the hand that lay on top of the blanket. Each movement was difficult, but he felt someone's warm palm squeeze his fingers. Anna noticed that he had woken up and immediately leaned over him. "Jacob, I'm here, honey." He moved his lips under his mask. "Record." She shook her head. "No, no, you need oxygen." Jacob frowned, gathering his remaining strength, and said quietly but insistently, "Take it off, please." Anna carefully lifted the mask from his face. It immediately became more difficult for him to breathe, but he endured. He needed to tell her. Now, while he was still conscious. "Don't say anything," Anna asked, noticing how he was struggling with every word. "Just save your strength." He shook his head. "No, I want to say." She came closer, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm listening, darling." Jacob looked at her familiar face, a little blurry from weakness, but so beautiful. He smiled with his eyes alone. "Thank you for the happiness." Anna burst into tears, pressing his hand to her cheek. Don't say that, please." SHH. He tried to raise his hand to wipe away her tears, but it was too heavy. Anna herself caught his gesture and pressed her palm to her face. He felt the moisture of her tears on his fingers. "You gave me life after death." Anna shook her head. "We'll live for a while, do you hear? You'll cope." She seemed to no longer believe in this sweet deception. Her voice was breaking. But Jacob found a shadow of a smile in himself. "I've already lived my life. But you, promise. Anything," she sobbed. "Live on. Don't give up." He whispered, repeating her words once. "For both of us." Anna leaned over and kissed him on the forehead like a child. "I promise," she said barely audibly. "Just don't go. I can't without you." Jacob closed his eyes against the overwhelming weakness. It seemed that his strength was finally leaving him. His body was numb. Sounds were muffled. Somewhere far away, a monitor began to beep rhythmically, anxiously. He heard people running around, voices, but he could no longer make out the words. Jacob's mind suddenly painted a different picture. He seemed to be standing on the ocean shore. Warm sand under his feet, gentle surf rolling onto the shore in foamy crests. A ringing laugh was heard nearby. Jacob turned around and saw Lily. Alive, healthy, in the same white dress she wore at their wedding. She was waving at him, her face glowing with happiness. "Come to me," Lily calls tenderly. There is no trace of pain or guilt in her eyes, only love. Jacob steps toward her, knee-deep in the warm water, and his heart fills with peace. He knows it's a vision, but he can't resist. Lily takes his hand, her fingers warm and familiar. She presses herself against him, just as she did at the end of their wedding day. "I'm waiting for you," she whispers. "I just need a little bit more." He answers with effort. Not much longer, my love. Lily smiles through her tears and nods. I know. In the distance, there is a faint noise, voices calling him back. Jacob glances back for a moment beyond the beach and sees the blurred figures in white, doctors, bending over his body. And next to him is Anna, his dear Anna, holding his hand tightly. Lily strokes his cheek, bringing his attention back to herself. Everything is fine. Go in peace. I forgive you and love you. Hot tears roll down Jacob's cheeks, either in a vision or in reality. He smiles through them, feeling infinite gratitude. I love. He tries to tell both Lily and Anna at the same time. Opening his eyes for the last time, he still saw the vague figures of doctors above him, but most importantly, he felt. His left hand was still in Anna's warm palms. She did not let go. His lips moved silently, I love. He wanted to say, but his breath stopped. The last thing he felt was how her fingers convulsively squeezed his hand, and his own palm could no longer respond. It only twitched slightly and weakened, her fingers unclenched. Anna felt Jacob's hand go limp in hers. It was as if the light that had warmed her heart had gone out. The monitor gave a long, monotonous beep. Jacob. She breathed out in despair, catching his weakening hand with both of hers, but she no longer responded to the squeeze. Jacob's hand hung limply from hers, lifeless. His eyes were half open, but unseeing. Anna quietly covered them with a trembling hand. It seemed as if the whole world had stopped for that second. There was a ringing silence in the room, broken only by the quiet crying of a woman saying goodbye to the love of her short but bright life. The spring sun gilded the windows of the Nejda hospice. Anna sat on the familiar steps of the porch, squinting against the bright light. In her hands, she was twirling a domino, a six-double, warmed by someone else's fingers. Anna treasured this simple thing, a gift from a friend who was no longer around. 3 months had passed since Jacob left this world. At first, Anna was afraid that she wouldn't be able to bear it every day without him seemed like torture. But the promise she made to her beloved didn't allow her to break down. She returned to work almost immediately, brushing aside the exhortations to take a break. Now, her every action, every care for a new patient was dedicated to him. During these months, Anna thought a lot about what she had experienced with Jacob. His photograph, laughing, healthy, with warm rays of wrinkles around his eyes, now stood on her bedside table. Sometimes in the mornings, she would say hello to him out loud, imagining that he would respond with his usual gentle gaze. More than once at night, she would wake up in tears from dreams where Jacob was alive in the dream. They were simply drinking coffee on the porch or walking in the park. It was painful to wake up, but over time, the sharp pain hardened into a quiet sadness. Anna knew the wound would never heal, and she didn't want it to. The pain of loss meant that the love was real, and she decided to direct that love to those who still needed it. Now the hospice had a new rule. Every Sunday, Anna would arrange a small celebration for the patients. She would bake muffins or bring flowers to each room. Jacob loved Sunday mornings. She remembered how they once brought an old gramophone to the hospice and played Elvis records all day, forcing even the most sullen patients to sing along. Now she continued this tradition for him. Anna, we need help in the 3rd ward. Nurse Maria called out to her from the half-open door. Anna stood up, clutching the domino tightly in her fist. I'm coming, she responded cheerfully. She glanced back for a moment. The spring wind gently touched her hair, like someone's invisible hand. Anna smiled at the heavens quietly, brightly. A warm wave of feeling spread through her chest. Jacob is near, and he will be near in her heart, in every good deed that she does. I'm not giving up, my love, Anna whispered, entering the cool of the hospice. I live, for both of us. Friends, thank you for being with us. Subscribe if you are interested in such stories. There are a lot of exciting things ahead. We are trying for you, and any support is a huge motivation to continue. If something can be improved, write in the comments with kindness. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.